Welcome to Straight from the Gavel. I'm your host, Dave Barber. Each and every week at this time, we like to invite a member of the General Assembly in and discuss some of the things that they have been working on during the off-season. But more importantly, now that session is getting underway for 2014, it's important to see what might be a priority on their agenda as they approach this new year. It gives me a great deal of pleasure to welcome a gentleman who we've interviewed on Capitol Television before, but it's certainly good to have him here in this forum. He represents the great city of Warwick, the Honorable State Representative Joe Sherkarchi. Representative, it's great to see you.
Thank you. Nice to see you, and Happy New Year to you and all the viewers out there as well.
Well, and not only that, but since I last interviewed you, I've moved myself personally into the Warwick area, Coesit more specifically, and I really like it.
A wise choice.
Well, listen, it's a great community. You have a wonderful district that you represent, and there's a lot of exciting stuff going on there that we plan to talk about in this half hour.
Let me just tell you that Warwick is a beautiful community to live, raise your family. We have 39 miles of coastline there. We have an incredible school system. We have a beautiful park system. So welcome to the city. I hope many years to come of happiness in the city.
Well, I'll tell you what. I had a very good experience in Pawtucket. I enjoyed living in Pawtucket. This is a completely different feel. And I have to tell you, in wake of what's happened economically across our country and across our state, Warwick seems to be one of those communities that has weathered the storm pretty well.
We have a very pro-business mayor and pro-business city council. We've been able to attract business to the city even in this downturn. We've had some great expansion stories. Belize Motors has expanded in the city. Brewed Awakenings is opening the largest coffee house in the country in the city of Warwick. Those are good projects that'll drive the economic engine of Warwick. We try to continue to expand our tax base, but also provide necessities and needed services to the community. Warwick's a beautiful community. I'm very proud to represent it. I've lived there. I practiced there. I'm a lifelong resident of Warwick. I used to work for the city many years ago. It's a beautiful community, and I'm proud to call it home.
Well, Representative, you touched on the economy, and obviously that's still a focus of many people in the General Assembly. As you approach this new session, do you have any special plans to focus on as you approach 2014 to help to continue our economy to get out of the doldrums and to continue to grow?
Yes, I'm glad you brought up that point. A couple of things. I had a bill last year, which I call it my jobs bill, that would help incentivize companies with a slight tax break for every job they created and hired. That bill didn't go anywhere in the session last year, had a favorable response, but didn't move out of House Finance. I plan on reintroducing it. I have had some discussions with the governor's office. They seem to be more supportive of the bill this year than they were last year. So hopefully we can get behind that bill. That's a good bill that basically takes the tax break that we've talked about a couple of times regarding CVS and big corporations, but opens it up to small and medium businesses so that everybody will have an opportunity to participate in that program. It's an already existing program in the state. It happens to work very well, but it only works for large corporations. I want it to work for everybody. So that's the single most important piece of legislation I can introduce was helping to create jobs in this economy and in this state. The economy is going to be the driving force. It was last year in the General Assembly. It will again be this year as well. So we as a group all have to work together. We have to get some of the regulation off of small business, let them grow, let them prosper, and then hopefully do some things here that will stimulate the economy. We had a pretty good, productive session last year. There were some things, as you know, there's no magic bullet that we can just pass or press a button and all of a sudden the economy that gets better. But we can work in incremental steps. I feel we're heading in that direction. The budget that was passed last year had no broad-based tax increases. That's a good thing. Provided more aid to the city of Warwick, but more aid to the state and education. So these things are good things that are happening, and we want to continue that. I'm also introducing a piece of legislation. We had a surplus, approximately a $90 million surplus, which sounds like a lot, but in terms of an $8 billion budget, it really is not that much. And what I'm proposing in my bill for this coming session is that half of any surplus we generate get returned to cities and towns, and so that can be used for them. And specifically, that legislation, that when it gets returned, any surplus funds go to cities and towns would be used to retire debt in the cities and towns, or toward unfunded liabilities. That has a double impact, a double positive impact.
Am I understanding you correctly? If your legislation was successful, the cities and towns would be mandated to use the money in those two areas?
Yes. This is extra money. This is not city and town aid. This is not education formula. This is extra money. It is, in essence, a windfall, a little bonus surplus that we have gets returned to them, and it gets only used in those two areas. The city and town and the city councils and the mayors can decide where, but either has to go toward unfunded liabilities or toward debt. And the reason that those funds would be used in that way was it has a double impact of benefit. It would help increase local city and towns' bond ratings. And when we do that, they're able to borrow at a reduced cost. So not only are we bringing down the debt, we're increasing our bond ratings. That's a very important thing as we move forward so that cities and towns can continue to operate, but at reduced cost. It's a way to help cities and towns without raising taxes on the taxpayers.
Would the money go to all the cities and towns, or would you
Yes.
single out the cities and towns that are having the most difficulty?
No, we have a formula in the state, and it would be allocated per formula, and it's based on population. So that every city and town would participate in some way.
Well, that's interesting, and I'm sure the cities and towns would certainly welcome that infusion of a few extra dollars, because it could certainly be helpful in these tough times. One of the other...
Well, let me finish with that point. It's a good point. But if that bill was in effect this year, we would return an extra $45 million of state aid to cities and towns. That was if it was in effect in 2013.
Yeah, that's nothing to sneeze at.
That's pretty good, and it doesn't cost the taxpayers anything.
Now, one of the other areas that undoubtedly you may be dealing with again this session deals with pension reform. Depending on what happens in the courts, there was some real historic legislation that took place in 2011. I realize you weren't in the House of Representatives at that time, but what are your feelings regarding this whole pension reform matter?
Well, it's interesting because, there is a gag order on, so we don't know any of the details that's happening. And unfortunately, we in the General Assembly are not party to it, although, quite frankly, I think we should be, but that's another story for another day. But what will happen, presumably, is they will reach some form of a settlement and would come back to the General Assembly for action. I don't know. We need the devil's in the details. We need to see what it is. I will tell you that I'm receptive to listening and learning to it. I have to give the General Assembly great credit for taking action several years ago. I was not here, but it was a historic thing. There was some great benefits that provided, the state as a whole, but also we are now basically the leader of this effort throughout the country. People look at Rhode Island in a positive way. The important thing, any kind of revisiting of pension reform, in my opinion, I only speak for myself, is that it must have the support of all the parties involved. The governor must support it, the general treasurer must support it, and the unions who brought the suit must support it. Because if it comes back to the General Assembly and 1, 2, or 3 of those parties don't agree with that settlement, then it's going to be a free-for-all, and we're going to reopen basically the same debate that this body had 2 years ago. And I would not be generally supportive of that kind of legislation unless, again, devil's in the details, but unless everybody was in support of that bill. Then I would look at it with a little bit more favorably. But before I make any kind of a commitment, I need to see what I'm committing to.
Well, I know it was obviously very important to Speaker Fox. I recall that he brought a special session in of the General Assembly to deal just specifically with that pension issue. It was so important that they eked out the time and the effort to just focus on that, and it was considered history-making at the time. And again, you can't be accused of just kicking the can down the road. Some tough decisions were made, and it was something that many folks thought was most necessary.
And to the Speaker's credit, it was not, he did call a special session. It was historic, made headlines across the country, and it was a great benefit to the state as a whole. And the process was inclusive. You may not have liked the outcome, you may not have liked it, but everybody was able at least to be heard in that process. So I give the Speaker a lot of credit, and the General Assembly as a whole, for doing that. If you remember, all the parties, the Senate, the House, the Governor, and the Treasurer, all came together on that issue. So let's hope that that same kind of bipartisan or universal agreement will come back. If this bill or if this issue is to come back with the General Assembly, let's hope it comes back in the same way.
A gentleman who has sat in that chair, one of your colleagues, Representative McNamara, has been on this show, and in months gone by, he's brought up the issue of the car tax. Possibly that will be revisited again this year as we move into 2014. Your thoughts? Can something be done about the car tax that is viewed by the citizenry as being more fair and equitable?
Yes, that's a good point. First of all, I want to congratulate Representative McNamara because he's been the champion of this issue, at least in the House side, for many sessions. Joe McNamara, who's worked very hard on this, he and I both spoke recently at the Vehicle Valuation Committee with the hope that they would simply revisit this issue. If this issue is done right, this is not really a revenue issue. This is a fairness issue. The cities and towns can derive the same amount of revenue from car taxes as they are from any other source, as long as it's fair. That's the big problem with the public. The problem the public has is they have a vehicle that in their mind is worth $10,000, but they're being taxed on it for $20,000. It's just not fair. It's just not right. I had legislation in last year that changed the formula. Representative McNamara had some in. We both co-sponsored each other's legislation. I assume we'll do the same this year, but I plan on reintroducing my bill with just a little bit different. The cities and towns spoke against my bill because they said their budgets were already set and they couldn't change the formula.
Well, they like it being taxed on a higher number.
But they can raise the rate. See, the point I'm making is the cities and towns can derive the same amount of revenue. People don't have a problem with the rate. They have a problem with the valuation. And that's what people feel is unfair, that someone's driving a $20,000 a year car and they're only being taxed at 10, and someone's driving at 10, it's at 20. That's not right. It's inherently unfair. So my legislation I'll introduce this year will have a enactment clause for next year, for 2015. So hopefully it'll get a little bit more traction this year and move somewhere.
I can't imagine anybody watching right now disagreeing with you on that. Okay, if I got to pay a tax, fine, but just evaluate the value of my car at the fair market value.
It's not rocket science.
And people had a feeling that they were kind of being gouged, that they would love to be able to sell the vehicle at the rate in which they were paying taxes on. But it's not practical. So what's going to be the magic formula? What number do you use?
I just think it has to be a fair valuation. It has to be uniformly applied. We have to look at a Kelley Blue Book or a NAD book or whatever the industry standard is, and tax based on that. Every city and town can change the rate. You can tax at $10 per thousand or $11 per thousand or $9 per thousand. That's a local issue. The issue on valuation should be the same. There's no reason my car in Warwick should be any more worth any more less than your car in Pawtucket or anybody else's car. A car in Rhode Island is the same value whether we're driving in the northern part of the state or the southern part of the state. It just needs to be fair. It's not rocket science to get it done, and we should be able to get it done. Do
you feel good about it? Do you think this could be the year?
Cautiously optimistic. We'll try. We'll go through the process. We'll see what the General Assembly, we'll see what the House Finance Committee feels about it, and we'll see how the cities and towns feel about it. But it should happen. It's an election year. Hopefully more substantive issues, more voter-friendly issues will happen this year, this session.
I mentioned at the onset, the new session is underway this week.
Tomorrow.
We're taping on the Monday before the opening day of session. Many people watching right now have the misconception that during recess you folks just go back to your communities and kind of live happily ever after and not a heck of a lot goes on. I know in working in this building couldn't be further from the truth. For example, many of you folks serve on commissions. You chair a commission that deals with some zoning laws that meets during the off-season. Tell us about that, and what are the types of things that keep you busy during those months when you're not in General Assembly session?
Well, all of us are busy to many degrees. A lot of legislators are very busy in their community. It gives us a chance to get involved with our local city and town council people, to attend city council meetings, to listen to the community, see what they have. But yeah, I also chair, along with many of the people, there are at least 6 or 7 that I know of active study commissions working. The commission I'm working on is studying all the zoning and planning, enabling legislation and laws throughout the state, see if we can make some improvements to that. That meets regularly. You're very involved with cities and towns, with communities. You get involved in community organizations. You attend dedications. There's a lot that goes in that, even though we're not in the General Assembly, there's a lot of work that happens, and it's a lot of good work. It's a work with the people, so you can hear from them. You can hear people actually watch the show and they comment on it. People actually email me and tell me that, you know, you had a good voting record. I had perfect attendance. One of my constituents congratulated me on that. It's nice to hear that feedback, and it's nice to interact with your constituents and community. It gives me a greater sense of what's important to them. So when I come here, I can advocate for my constituents.
You know, this past summer, we did a special on West Warwick, and we had occasion to interview former Speaker Bill Murphy. And like you, he was a lifelong resident of West Warwick. You're a lifelong resident of Warwick. He told us in the interview that people were not bashful about coming up to his doorstep and ringing his doorbell. Does that happen to you? Do constituents ever come up and knock on your door and make a special request or have a problem, or maybe better yet, have an idea for legislation?
Yes, I got two requests. One regarding hiring practices from a constituent of mine. I get stopped a lot in the coffee shop. There's 3 different coffee shops I visit in my district, and I have a constituent who wants a Red Sox plate for combination. We have Red Sox plates, so I have had that interaction. It's good, but today most of my communication is via email. I received over 1,000 emails this past year from constituents from all types of hot-button issues, but also just regular constituent issues. A lot of people, can't get their unemployment check. A lot of people can't make contact with government, or they have some kind of a problem. So we have a very good constituent service staff here. I congratulate the staff we have in the House, and I reach out to them, and 99% of my constituents' problems get solved. So I'm happy. I'm happy to perform that little service.
See, I tell people all the time that it's the position of your office that can be so helpful to constituents, because one thing that you folks are pretty good at is helping people cut through the red tape sometimes. And when a constituent services person calls, or somebody from your office specifically calls, sometimes those matters can get accelerated, and that constituent's problem can be looked into more swiftly. And that's a thing that, being a servant in the House of Representatives, you bring to the table for the people that you serve.
I agree. The most important thing you can do for any constituent is to listen to them. They appreciate the effort. Sometimes you're not successful, but they appreciate that you listened to their concerns, you made an effort, and you got back to them. You didn't ignore them. You didn't take them for granted. You didn't blow off their issue. You addressed their issue, and if you solve the issue, I've had a group of constituents in my district who contacted me. It was not a legislative issue, but they were very concerned with RIPTA. Rhode Island Public Transit was going to cut their services in my district, in the heart of it. And that's the area that we're talking about is Buttonwoods, which services a lot of community services agencies over there. And they were very concerned. They reached out to me. We had a public hearing in Warwick. We had a tremendous amount of contact with RIPTA, and we were very successful. RIPTA did not make any cuts. I got so many thank you letters, some publicly in the Warwick Beacon, most of them privately through email. And that, it's a sense of gratitude that I really appreciate, that people thanked me for the effort. They thanked me for showing up. They thanked me for writing letters. They thanked me for the success we did. That makes you feel good. It feels like you accomplished something. It had nothing to do with a bill.
Right.
Nothing to do with a vote. It had to do with just reaching out to the people, listening to them. They wanted the bully pulpit of a state representative fighting for them.
And you were successful. And again, mass transportation is good for the environment. It's good for the community because it can save folks money. It's an economical way to travel. And as you said, it wasn't legislation, but you went in as an advocate and were able to help them, and you kept the wolves at bay, and RIPTA was not cut. So I would think that would make your constituents pretty happy.
They were very happy, and they gave me that feedback, and it made me feel happy that I was able to get it done for them.
I've talked to you in the past about this when we've had you on Capitol Spotlight, about the importance of TF Green Airport. The role it plays in our economy. Are we doing enough in terms of really exploiting TF Green, maybe to help contribute more to our economic growth? It's a very easy airport to navigate. It's consumer friendly, I think. But can we be doing more, and will we ultimately get nonstop service to the West Coast?
Yes, you will. Yes, we can do more. We are doing more. The new director, Kelly Fredericks, is outstanding. He's very much hands-on. I've had several meetings with him about constituent issues, just about the airport itself and about the agreement. He's the driving force behind the airport. I do expect to hear in the very near future some announcements for possibly European service or possibly West Coast service. There's a tremendous amount of activity. We rebranded that whole area around Warwick, called Warwick Center now. It used to be the old Station District, and hopefully now that'll be able to take off. We've got some great prominent Rhode Island developers who have invested significantly in acquiring property there. They have plans that have been approved. They need a tenant to make the deal work. They need a user. Once they get that user, that area will take off. I expect a lot of good things happening in that area.
Is there much freight business out of that airport now?
Yes, there is. Significant amount. Okay. Federal Express and other places, UPS. One thing that we need, I think, I'm not a transportation expert, I'm not a planning expert, but we need to have that Amtrak station available and Amtrak trains stop there. Right now we only have MBTA trains. If we could get Amtrak to stop in Warwick, you then will link the airport to New York City and to this Boston points north. Now to some degree Boston now is linked, but we have the local MBTA, so this makes stops along the way. If we can connect that Amtrak thing, that Amtrak station with the Amtrak stops to the T.F. Green Airport, that will be a catalyst, in my opinion, to real strong economic growth and development in that area.
Boy, that certainly makes good sense. I would love to see that too. That just seems like that could be a very good fit, and again, help boost the economy here in the Ocean State. You know, I got to hand it to you. As I did a little count, you had a pretty successful first session in the House of Representatives. What, some 8 bills signed into law? That's got to make you feel pretty good.
It does. A sense of accomplishment, some good pieces of legislation. We finally, after many attempts this year, were able to license home inspectors so that people who perform home inspections are able to be licensed in the state of Rhode Island. We were able to put some legislation in that helped, the NAACP, that was important to me. We put in legislation to help animals. So there was some good stuff that passed. There was some handicap accessibility issues that passed that helped the handicapped community out. So I'm proud of those things, but I'm just getting started. I hope to move to more substantive issues in the future.
Well, you didn't waste any time getting out of the blocks.
Thank you.
I mean, that's a pretty good success rate right there. And again, if you can keep that momentum as you head into 2014, that's got to bode well for you.
My biggest goal this year is put through some good, strong economic development legislation, some form that will help move the economy forward in Rhode Island. That's the most important thing. I hear that. That's the overwhelming theme from everybody is they want a job. If they get a job, they can pay taxes. If they pay taxes, we can support a lot of the social services, a lot of the programs. We need to create jobs. If we create jobs, everything else will fall in line.
You know, and not only that, but job creation also has a positive impact on reducing crime. You can go to any state or any urban area, and if unemployment's low, crime drops, and the impact that it can have on public safety is really positive too.
It just has a domino effect. If people have a job, they buy a house. If they buy a car, they pay taxes. It's all revenue driven. So if we create a job for somebody, that's the best thing we can. It's the best social program we can do.
Well, I mentioned that Warwick has weathered the economic storm, I think, better than many communities here in Rhode Island. As you get ready to approach this new session, what do you have in mind specifically for Warwick? What kinds of things would you like to see happen that would benefit your constituents specifically in Warwick?
Generally, again, going back to the economic issues, that'll help everybody as well as Warwick. Also, last year we passed one of the bills you talked about, the 8 bills I passed, would allow veterans a little bit more of an exemption for the community. I'd like to look at the possibility in the city of Warwick of having an appointed school committee in terms of an elected school committee. That's something I won't do unilaterally. I want to do that in conjunction with the city council. That's an issue. We've had issues regarding schools in Warwick and school closures. I think we need to look at that in general. So those are some things that are Warwick specific, but I also really looking at for the state. I want to correct one thing I said before. I said I worked on legislation for the NAACP. It was at the National Society for the Prevention of Cruelties of Animals, the NCPA. So I wanted to say that, just to correct myself.
No problem. Now, You mentioned that you spend a lot of time in your community visiting with the citizens there. Many community organizations have been facing tough financial challenges with the economy, budgets being cut, allocations from the state. You mentioned your help with RIPTA earlier, but what have you been able to do to help some of these community organizations in Warwick?
Well, we're talking specifically about the nonprofits, and the nonprofits are being cut everywhere. So I was able to work hard through the legislative session this year, and I was able to obtain some small grants. But in those nonprofits, a small $1,000, $2,000, $2,500 grant goes a long way. So I was able to help the American Little League, was able to help a local organization called Jonah in Warwick. It's Join Our Neighborhood and Help, and they do a tremendous amount of nonprofit work. I was able to help VOWS, which is volunteers in the Warwick school system, and different other organizations regarding childhood obesity and other good programs, including the elderly, which is the Warwick Housing Authority. So I'm proud of getting those legislative grants for those communities. It doesn't add up to a lot of money when you look at it, but $1,000 in a nonprofit organization goes a long, long way to helping them, and I'm proud of that.
You know, and not only that, you have to, although I don't have any research in front of me right now to substantiate this, but empirically I feel that when you have tough economic times, it's reasonable to conclude that maybe charitable giving is down because people just don't have the discretionary money to help maybe their favorite cause that they normally would. So that $1,000 or $1,500 grant is probably needed more than ever during these tough times.
And in those communities, in those settings, it goes so much longer, a longer way than it would do any kind of a profit corporation, because it's all nonprofit. All of that money goes back into the particular cause, so that's a good thing.
Now, as you get ready to start playing, as I like to call it, Rock'em Sock'em Robots with all of the debating and conversation and committees that meet about all of this legislation, do you get the feeling, yourself personally and from what your constituents are telling you, that the worst is behind us? Do you think we're seeing our way clear out of this economic funk that our whole country, in fact, much of the planet has been in the last few years?
I think we are at bottom. I don't think we're getting worse. I think we have nowhere to go but up. And to answer your question, yes, I do see little signs, little indication of things heading in the right direction. It's not only from your constituents, but it's in my practice, which I represent a lot of small businesses. People are now starting to talk about a little bit of expansion, starting to talk about acquiring another property or looking to grow their business or relocate their business to Warwick. So things are happening in a good way, and I hope they continue. I hope we can help in the General Assembly stimulate that and that recovery happen a little bit faster, because right now you're starting to see the signs, but if you go back, you said my constituents, to the average person on the street, they still haven't felt that benefit yet. Stock market's doing well, business is starting to do well, but it hasn't gone down to the average person yet.
Yeah, stock market's doing great. What, 16,000, set a new record. But you said the key word when you said, faster. People do sense that it's getting a little bit better, but it's not getting better quite fast enough. And maybe you, Representative Sherkarchi, and your colleagues in the Rhode Island House of Representatives this year can nudge that speed along a little bit. I want to thank you so much for being our guest today. The half hour zipped by. I wish you and your fellow members of the Rhode Island House the very best.
Thank you very much, and same to you.
And, of course, we could not do it without you. Thank you so much for watching. My name is Dave Barber, and remember, you heard it straight from the Gavel.